Before we get started, I just want to let you guys know about my comic, Dark Phantom. Issues 1 through 5 are available now on Comixology and Gumroad. We've worked really hard on it and it would mean a lot to me if you would check it out. Thanks, and let's get on with the video. Hey, welcome to Class Act Media. I'm Jack, and I don't need to tell you how popular Batman is, right? He's appeared in countless comics, movies, video games, and, most relevant for our purposes today, animated shows. Batman's had a few cartoons over the decades, and each one is well remembered in its own right. Batman the Animated Series and its follow-up, Batman Beyond, are rightfully regarded as all-time classics. Batman the Brave and the Bold is a fun and loving send-up to the Silver Age of comics. Even previously forgotten shows like The Batman are starting to get the recognition they deserve. But one show that I never see get mentioned is Beware the Batman. I've always wondered why that was. I remember watching the first few episodes as they aired and thought they were alright, but I kind of fell off it early on. The show only lasted for about half a season on Cartoon Network before being completely forgotten by the network and having the rest of the episodes being quietly dumped on Adult Swim, never to be spoken of again. And I think that's a shame, because the show does have a unique take on Batman that deserves to be discussed. Let's start with the most immediately apparent aspect of the show, the art style. Beware the Batman uses heavily stylized 3D animation, similar to the Ninja Turtles or Green Lantern cartoons that were airing around the same time. Side note, Green Lantern the Animated Series probably deserves its own video in the future, that show is great. Anyway, this style could be very hit or miss. On the one hand, the action scenes look great. They're fast, slick, and you can always tell what's going on and who's fighting who. On the other hand, the scenes where people are just standing around and talking look off. And oh boy, sometimes the animation can be very clunky, presumably because of the show's low budget. This was mainly just a problem in the beginning though. Things did get smoothed out toward the end, but it never looked all that great. And as for character design, I'm somewhat mixed on the way Batman looks. I think overall, he looks great. He's got the right proportion of slim to muscular, he's suitably intimidating, and oh boy, there's some good ears. But I just can't get over that monochromatic bat suit. There's a reason Batman is normally depicted as wearing gray, with black as a secondary color. The suit, and more specifically the bat symbol on his chest, just don't pop as well if the whole costume is black. I have the same problem with the Christopher Nolan bat suit. As far as other redesigns go, probably the most drastic change from the source material is Alfred, who's gone from a prim and proper man with a dry wit to a bald, tough-as-nails ex-secret agent with a Cockney accent. This version of Alfred took a lot of getting used to, but once I did, I actually really enjoyed his relationship with Batman. Bruce and Alfred have always had a father-son dynamic in the comics, and that's still very present here, but it's layered with a sort of mentor-mentee dynamic too. His past as, let's face it, essentially an action hero gives him a new perspective on Batman's mission, as he's always giving him advice and even getting out into the field occasionally. I prefer the traditional version of Alfred, but this more rugged take works well here. Batman is also written very well in this show. They really dive into the detective aspect of the character and give him a lot of good mystery-solving scenes that kind of remind me of Sherlock. They also really show his obsessive side. This is one of the most enigmatically mysterious versions of Batman I've ever seen in a kid's show, and I mean that in a good way. They really earn the title of Beware the Batman, as they make him out to be a much more mythic character than how we've seen him in previous versions. As much as I like these versions of Batman and Alfred though, everyone else seems off. For Batman's sidekick, rather than going with someone more recognizable, they decided to go with the more unexpected route and chose Katana. They also have Metamorpho in a few episodes, so I wonder if they were trying to make a backdoor Batman and the Outsiders show.
Maybe the three of us outsiders will partner up again someday.
He's in, boys! He did it! He said it!
Anyway, Katana is really just fine here. Like, her role is sidekick who offers sarcastic remarks to offset Batman's broodiness, and she fills that role just fine, but nothing really stands out about her. They make her a former member of the villainous League of Assassins, but they don't really dive into that aspect of her too much. And when they do, I just found it really uninteresting. They also give Alfred a mysterious backstory involving her dead father, but again, not much is done with it. They tried to give her a romantic subplot with a guy named Jason, but it was kinda really bad and they just killed him off in the middle of the season, never to be mentioned again. It just feels like they wanted to go with a more obscure character for Batman's sidekick, but I think the role would have been better filled by someone like Robin or Batgirl, a younger presence so Batman has someone to mentor and mirror his relationship with Alfred. In fact, they even have Barbara Gordon in the show, but they just have her skip past being Batgirl and go right to being Oracle, which is fine, but just feels like a bit of a missed opportunity to me. The show's trend of using more obscure comic book characters extends to its villains, too. For most of the series, the most mainstream antagonist we see is Ra's al Ghul, who serves as the big bad for the first half of the season. The rest of the Rogues Gallery is filled with villains most people have never heard of, like Professor Pig and Mr. Toad, Magpie, Phosphorus Rex, Cypher, and Anarchy. There's no Joker, Riddler, or Catwoman to be seen here. Now, I appreciate what they're going for here, taking little-known characters and presenting them to a new audience rather than showing us reimaginings of villains we've seen before. It's a strategy that's worked to great effect in the past, like the legendary reinvention of Mr. Freeze in Batman the Animated Series. But there's a reason these villains aren't as well known as Batman's other enemies, and I don't think Beware does a good job giving us interesting spins on them. For example, Professor Pig in the comics is a mad surgeon who performs horrifying reconstructive surgeries on people to make them quote-unquote perfect. Obviously, they couldn't do that on Cartoon Network, so they decided to just make him an eco-terrorist who hates people and loves animals. I do love his new Victorian aesthetic, but his motivations just feel half-baked, which is true for most of Beware's villains. There are also a lot of characters filling roles that other Batman rogues normally fill. For example, in the comics, Ra's al Ghul's sexy femme fatale second-in-command is usually his daughter, Talia, whereas here it's Lady Shiva. Again, she's a perfectly fine character, but we lose that romantic relationship with Batman that Talia has, and it's not really replaced with anything. And then there's Anarchy. Let's see, he's a giggling madman who laughs in the face of death, wants to point out the hypocrisy of Batman's war on crime, and has a mysterious past and no real motivations beside wanting to cause chaos. This guy's a total ripoff of Crazy Quilt. Okay, but seriously, Anarchy's not a complete ripoff of Joker. He's much more of a physical match for Batman, and his personality is unique enough, but what he represents here is so close to what Joker normally does that I can't help but compare the two characters. They even changed Anarchy's gold mask from the comics to a white one, so I think they were very aware of what they were doing. In the latter half of the season, we do start to see a trickle of bigger name villains like Killer Croc, Man-Bat, and a couple of others I won't spoil, but again, I just don't find these takes very interesting. Killer Croc isn't much more than a macho, southern tough guy, and Man-Bat's story is about how, even though he looks like a monster on the outside, he hasn't changed on the inside, which is more or less the exact same thing they did with Metamorpho earlier in the season. I definitely would have preferred the more Jekyll and Hyde approach like in the comics. I don't want to sound too down on Beware the Batman though, since there are a lot of good qualities about it. Even though it aired on Cartoon Network and was technically aimed at kids, it uses the limitations placed upon itself to tell some pretty dark stories through implication, which, when done right, can be even creepier than when the dark aspects are more overt. These can be little things, like a gangster who's nicknamed Ice Pick and it's left to the viewer to infer where he got that nickname. They can also be whole episodes like the ones revolving around my favorite villain in the show, Humpty Dumpty. I know, I was just as surprised as you are. Again, there are subtle things, like Batman saying Humpty's grandmother was found deceased under, quote, mysterious circumstances, which, if you know his comic book backstory, is grim. Just like with Professor Pig, Humpty's motivations aren't anything all that interesting. He was a former mob accountant who went crazy after he talked to the police and they tried to kill him. Not bad, but nothing spectacular. The true creepiness of Humpty Dumpty, though, comes from his actions. I like my Batman villains to have that good mix of comic booky, over-the-top style and creepy, down-to-earth darkness, and Humpty Dumpty has that in spades. He traps people inside toy soldiers and almost kills them. He kidnaps people and puts them in a death trap-filled mansion. Oh, and here he is killing himself. Okay, it was obviously a fake, but still. Cartoon Network. As much as I like this version of Humpty Dumpty though, I think a lot of Beware the Batman can be best described as half-baked. It's not bad, but the things that make it stand out never really match the heights of other Batman shows. But if one day Adult Swim said they were bringing back Beware the Batman for a season 2, I'd certainly be tuning in. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, consider subscribing. If you really like me, check out my Patreon. If you want updates on future videos, follow me on Twitter @ClassActJack. Links to everything in the description. I'll see you guys later.